I lecture and teach the art of video game audio at the University of Southern California's Interactive Media and Games Division, as well as a number of other prestigious universities, conferences, and industry events all over the world. And I also consult for a variety of innovative technology companies, including serving on the Technology Advisory Board for VR Studios Incorporated, which is a boundary-pushing commercial virtual reality company that has created wireless, full-motion virtual reality technology. Now, every year, more complex interfaces and completely new forms of game experiences emerge that we audio designers are really called upon to master, each with its own set of brand new complications when it comes to creating immersive, compelling sound designs. And one of the more interesting types of products from a sound design standpoint, in my opinion, is the augmented reality game or experience. But with wearable interfaces and head-mounted displays becoming more commonplace over the next few years, I believe this kind of game is going to become even more prevalent, and we'll need to cultivate the skills not only to create quality audio that meshes seamlessly with the real world around the player, but also does so in a very artistic way that furthers the story. Now, in January of 2014, in collaboration with Intel Labs, my team and I worked with 5D Global and the USC School of Cinematic Arts World Building Media Lab to create the audio for Leviathan, a 3D immersive world that was featured in Intel CEO's keynote speech and in the company's booth on the show floor at the Consumer Electronics Show. Now, as the audience used Intel Ultrabooks and tablets to simultaneously control flying octopus-like creatures that swam alongside this eponymous augmented reality behemoth, Leviathan soared off the screen and into the crowd, integrating the physical and the digital universes. So we really wanted to fuse video games and cinema in order to create a new immersive narrative experience in which creators and audiences could engage with each other and physically explore a fictional, digitally constructed environment. And we just had over a month to do it in. 2 years later, I returned to the world of Leviathan, helping to bring life to both a brand new narrative and a conjoined augmented reality and virtual reality experience for the 2016 Sundance New Frontiers Festival and for Vision Summit. So today I'm going to share with you our process and techniques for constructing the audio for an immersive augmented reality product that was to be used simultaneously by dozens of people in a very loud, very intrusive trade show setting. I'm also going to talk about, a little later on, the new conjoined AR and VR experience as well. But more importantly, I'm going to show you how audio can be used in such an experience to advance storytelling. And in doing so, we're going to discuss how to approach an audio design in order to give life to an augmented reality world and the creatures that inhabit it, defining characters through sound while embracing and critically using ambiguity, and how to develop a successful iterative approach to create high-quality soundscapes on an extremely short schedule through audio concepting, coordinating the sound of music, and establishing a cohesive and effective audio aesthetic. But first, let me talk a little bit about the power of sound and technical sound design versus artistic sound design, because it's important and it applies to the philosophy of Leviathan. Now, I would imagine that everyone in this room would agree that audio has the ability to affect people on a deeper level than you might expect, perhaps even a subliminal level that the audience isn't even aware of. Sound is really this immensely powerful narrative device. And one of the most powerful things about it is that it can imply actions or items not possible through visuals. It doesn't need a screen to exist like visuals do. And it affects our perception of events on an even deeper degree than graphics, story, or character. Audio plays a crucial role in our emotional lives and alters our perceptions, affecting us on a deep emotional level because we are continually experiencing it. Unlike our eyes, the ears never blink. And audio is a great way to communicate messages, meaning, metaphors, pacing, and mood in a non-visual way. Think of the wizard in The Wizard of Oz.
I am I, the great and powerful. Who are you?
Now, this powerful character is introduced initially entirely through sound. We hear him long before we ever see him. And then when we do see him, he is reduced significantly in stature. We've been tricked by the audio, and the trick is revealed by the image. So well-designed audio has the potential to craft the story elements of a product, control the pacing of an experience, enforce the narrative, elicit and influence emotion, create mood, shape perception, and reinforce the way people experience characters. So sound can be utilized in the design process as a fundamental storytelling agent. Crafting deeper emotional resonance in advanced immersive environments can be carried out by focusing on the principles of audio aesthetics in addition to the use of 3D audio techniques. Employing proper aesthetic principles to drive the latest audio-specific tools, technologies, and techniques will enable game and emergent technology creators to push audio and interactive environments themselves forward in an emotionally impactful way. So sound design for immersive storytelling must be at the core of any creative pipeline for sound production. And technology and tools, they're there to realize our vision, but great sound design is about storytelling and about providing an experience. Creating great audio, like creating great software, is not just about the ones and zeros. Now, while it is important to have an understanding of oscillators and filters and envelopes and modulation and synthesis and so forth, and that is super important, we can't allow that to rule us. To truly work with sound in a breakthrough way is to focus on the art, not just have a technical perspective, but an emotive and narrative one. Now, if you take someone like this gentleman here, Alan Splett, he's one of the greatest sound designers for cinema. And he possessed the greatest qualities a sound designer needs to have, as described by his widow, Ann Kroeber. Attention to detail, nuance, perseverance, ability to vastly influence the mood of a scene by the choice and placement of sounds. So storytelling is really what defines any great sound designer, and it's what makes sounds to become truly alive in a game, a film, emergent technology experience, or just about any context. So tools become secondary, and at some point, what really matters are aspects such as listening capabilities and the aesthetic vision. As Splett wonderfully said in an interview about the sound of Dune, when the interviewer asked him for the sounds he uses, a squeaking cable slow down to make a roaring sound, why this? It just came to me, he says. There's a point where you can talk about things logically, and then after that, you have to leave the world of logic. I don't know where a lot of these ideas come from. They just do. And in this case, I got the sound from guy wires, wires that support TV antennas and things like that. And they were vibrating from some sort of machinery running. I don't know why I decided to do that, really. And the great Walter Murch, one of the most influential editors and sound designers to work in cinema during the past 30 years. And in fact, he coined the term sound designer. He said when asked about the relationship between creativity and technology, people eat with knives and forks, they eat with chopsticks, and they eat with their hands. The real goal is getting the food into the mouth. Balzac wrote 80 great novels in 20 years with a quill pen. So from a certain aspect, technology is irrelevant. What is always relevant is what you want to say. If you have something to say, you will find a method irrespective of the technology. So how did we apply this philosophy to Leviathan? Well, let's go back to the beginning. I was approached by Alex McDowell. And Alex is a BAFTA-nominated production designer responsible for such cinematic classics as Fight Club, Minority Report, Man of Steel, many others. He had been tapped by Intel to create a groundbreaking demo that would showcase the capabilities of their new ultra-powerful tablet chipsets at the Consumer Electronics Show, and he needed a very expressive sound design. The project would also showcase the possibilities of augmented reality and really unveil the possibilities of embedding a robust, fully realized world with technological avenues for new methods of viewing and interacting with the story. Now, the subject of Alex's demo would be an interactive adaptation of Scott Westerfeld's Leviathan novels. Anybody familiar with the Leviathan novels? Cool, yeah, so they're a young adult series, and they're set in this real rich steampunk world that reimagines World War I with mechanized war machines and genetically enhanced creature-based combat. Essentially, a biological revolution has supplanted the industrial revolution, and it tells the tale of a group of scientists enlisted in the British Air Service at the turn of the century, piloting a genetically engineered flying machine. And within this narrative world, all the fabricated creatures on the Leviathan, from the bees to the messenger lizards, they're all engineered to contribute to the ecosystem of this world. So Leviathan is this transmedia storytelling experiment based on the world-building design philosophy, an experiment in storytelling from the digital frontier that shatters the membrane between audience and content. And my team, we had to bring this rich world to life and the creatures that inhabit it through sound, creating an audio design, a musical score, and a mix that would not only be featured on Intel's stand at the show for 2 demos entitled Spotlight and Frames, but also in a keynote speech to be delivered by Intel's CEO. So Intel showcased 3 augmented reality demonstrations based upon the world of Leviathan. One demo was the opening keynote presentation given by Brian Krzanich, the CEO of Intel, and the other 2, Spotlight and Frames, ran in the Intel booth during CES. Now, the keynote would be presented live in front of 5,000 dignitaries, and the longer demos in the booth, again, Spotlight and Frames, would allow visitors to interact with characters through advanced augmented reality techniques. And we had to create this full audioscape for such an ambitious and large-scale project within an extremely tight schedule. So we developed a very successful iterative and collaborative audio approach. And we also did a lot of work with the manipulation of frequencies in order to communicate emotions and feelings within a noisy trade show environment. So let's watch as the giant whale, the Leviathan, swims above an audience of 5,000 people, all reaching out to touch this virtual creature flying overhead in real time from this excerpt of Intel's CES keynote.
Storytelling is taking on an amazing form. No longer limited to a flat book, a flat screen. With the right technology that we can enable, we can be immersed in this story. Some of you may know Scott Westerfeld's book, Leviathan. Leviathan is the story of a whale airship. Up until now, you've been, at best, engaged in that story. So that's great. But what if we could do more? What if we could bring the digital world into our world? Imagine Leviathan could be here in this room with us tonight, flying just above your heads. Wouldn't you want to reach out and touch it, wave to it, see it from every angle? Remember, I told you this was an immersive event tonight. Tonight, I don't want you to merely imagine a flying whale. I want you to experience it. Sight, sound, all of it.
And then the main demonstration ran in the spotlight stage. This was the spotlight stage. And during this demonstration, participants could actually both see the whale on the big screen and also see it from their own vantage points. So we distributed 20 convertible Ultrabooks, which are devices that can operate both as a tablet and a traditional laptop, to the audience before each presentation. And the Ultrabooks provided augmented reality views of the whale and enabled them to interact with baby Huxley creatures. And we'll talk about the baby Huxleys in just a minute. And here's a little bit about what it looked like in Intel's booth. I'll just play a small smidgen because the actual demo runs like close to 9 minutes.
It tells the tale of a group of scientists enlisted in the British Air Service at the turn of the century, piloting a genetically engineered flying machine. Leviathan is the first of many new immersive experiential story worlds. It embodies the evolution of storytelling. It's a robustly imagined and incredibly broad genre, available to explore, to experience, personal attractions, and different ways of
Those are the Huxleys getting spewed out of the Leviathan.
Oh, look at that. The Leviathan is spewing glowing baby Huxleys. That's right, Huxleys. Now they're making their way to this now, look.
So the Frames demo ran continuously during all hours that the Intel booth was open, and the Frame was a 3D sculpture showing how convertible Ultrabooks work. Here's actually a picture of the Frame sculpture. And the experience at the Frame focused on the baby Huxley creatures, which you just saw being spewed out. And we showed them circling around the Frame via augmented reality. So when a visitor touched one of them, it would fly up to the screen, and then you could interact with the Huxley in a variety of ways, you know, spinning it around or grabbing it by one of its tentacles. And this picture shows the Huxleys flying around the Frame. So the idea with Leviathan is that it's neither game, nor theater, nor film, nor literature, but really this coherent weave of all the art forms. So let's talk a little bit more about it. So as you just saw, particularly with Keynote and a little bit with the Spotlight demo, the demos start out as a traditional cinematic experience, but then they quickly and surprisingly transition to an augmented reality mode, where an audience member can pick up a tablet, point it at the screen, and see the whale fly out of the traditional cinematic two-dimensional screen and into the audience space itself. So every time you build out the world, you also create more space for story. And in a little bit, we'll see if we can coax the whale to come out here and visit us here at MAGFest. Now, the first step that we had to do is we had to conceptualize the various sounds that would actually comprise the world of Leviathan. And in the longer demo, we introduced the Huxleys, a swarm of kind of small octopus-like creatures released by the whale that the audience could interact with like virtual pets. And these cute, humorous characters really needed a range of sounds that could enable them to come alive. Let's bring out and meet a baby Huxley, shall we? Got to do the little switch over. Okay, cool. Get my hand off of the camera would be good. Come on. Not used to it being down there. I usually have the camera up.
Do you need help? Why don't you have someone hold it?
Yeah, Bill, do you think you can hold it for 1 sec? Cool. Come on. you. Two heads are better than one. So, make him dizzy. And he likes his belly to be rubbed. Oh, don't bump your head. Plays hide and seek. Found you again. Escape me. Hey, excuse yourself. And we can take a picture. All right, bye for now. But we'll bring out some of the new Huxley fabricants in a minute. Okay. Oh, the switchover is so clunky, but what are you going to do? Okay, so as I said, I'm going to bring out a little later some of the Huxley fabricants, which we had to create for Sundance and Vision Summit. And the fabricants are really these genetic combinations of baby Huxleys with a few different existing animals. So let's talk about the Huxley sounds. They came about really through a process of sound concepting or sonic storyboarding and iteration and creative direction and collaboration through the aesthetic device of ambiguity. And ambiguity is the idea that works of art are open to multiple meanings or interpretation. So, ambiguity. So this was a highly iterative process that involved sharing assets back and forth between the entire audio team and as well as the greater creative team. And again, we achieved these sounds primarily through the deliberate introduction of ambiguity into the sound design. Now, I believe the best works of art, whether they're films or paintings or pieces of music or stage plays or novels or what have you, that they create this relatively large canvas on which case the audience can, or in some cases must, fill in many of the details themselves through interpretation. So these creative endeavors really require the audience to make certain very personal assumptions about the work they're experiencing, based on their own past experiences and memories, triggering associations that the artist could never have foreseen. Now, we actually do an exercise and a project in my class at USC called the Mystery and Danger exercise, and it's an exercise to encourage ambiguous thinking. And it's an analysis and an articulation of an emotion or feeling using sound design properties. The first part of it consists of writing up a detailed analysis from your subjective perspective what mystery and danger would sound like. Meaning if a client asked you to create a sound design based on those words, what would you do? What does this mean to you? What would your process be? You know, how would you approach it? And then the second part is to actually create that soundscape or sound narrative. Now, last spring semester, I actually changed the word to envy. And here's an example of one of my students' interpretation of envy. I would suggest definitely closing your eyes and just taking in the sound textures. think he did a pretty good job. Now, by experience, we know that this sort of ambiguous creative direction can truly be inspiring because it forces the sonic interaction designer to make associations that they otherwise would not if just focused on the superficial. It really forced my audio team to think about the sound design in terms of feelings and emotions versus just acoustic properties. And this is the strategy we're going to talk about in the next step. So the most memorable characters are really defined within a medium by their sound palette. Audio concept work can really greatly aid designers in constructing a palette of sounds that are appropriate for various elements and themes within a medium, including character design. So we can explore characters, their emotional makeup, and their personality through sound concepting or sonic storyboarding. Now, in order to be successful in trying to create the Huxley sounds, I first had to become a Huxley. I had to immerse myself into what I thought might be the Huxley sounds. And again, this involved working mostly through emotive qualities and feelings and less on actual acoustic properties. And this process really allowed us to imagine our own sensations and bring our own meanings to the piece of work and have a much more creative and experimental exploration. Now, because of this, we could go much further into satisfying the intentions of the experience and the story versus if we just purely focused on very specific and technical audio strategies. Now, Huxley's really needed to strike the right balance between dangerous and cute. As we just kind of noticed, they make these adorable squeaky sounds, but they also convey an undercurrent of danger. See, they're playful, they want to engage you, they hardly seem dangerous at all, but strictly narratively speaking, they are actually gatherers of electricity, and one of their functions is to fly into lightning storms, get charges, and bring them back to the whale ship. So if you actually touch one in real life, it would probably electrocute you. Now, taking this into account, we first thought we might make some fizzle and hum noise underneath everything. Again, as you just noticed. And this would be underscored by a visual glow and perhaps even a charge reaction when you touch them on screen. And our first task was then to create the baseline Huxley voice and then work on their personality. So we decided to work from sort of a growl sound, a little bit of a scare at a lower pitch, which would progressively work its way up the register like a cat. However, the greater creative team also thought of baby animals when thinking about the Huxleys, and they also thought about shy kittens. And in fact, when the team spoke about the Huxleys, their voice would always go into high pitches. So they'd be like, "Oh, those Huxleys are so cute." So we kind of took that all into account, and we started creating these rough early sound concepts that stemmed from my vocalizations in order to give the team some options when deciding on the direction for how the Huxleys should sound in their minds. So I literally started doing things like going, meow, meow, because frankly, the best instrument you have is your own mouth. And there are many games and movies where the sounds actually start off as vocalizations, and then they get processed, blended, and mixed with other sounds and music so that you can't tell they're vocalizations. We also then use the vocalizations of these birds that I heard in Dallas, Texas, called the great-tailed grackle, to flesh out their sound palette. Let's take a listen and see if you can hear a Huxley in a great-tailed grackle. Could you hear a Huxley in there? So once we had that clear creative direction on the sounds, then we were able to develop them out in a much more rapid manner. Now, we also then learned at this time that we did need to keep these sounds in a higher frequency register because they would actually be coming out of the tablet speakers. We wouldn't be allowed to use headphones at this particular show. And so the sounds had to cut through the noise of the conference. Sounds that were in a medium to low range would not be heard over those speakers. So hence we ended up going with more kind of cute, high-pitched sounds. Now, once we had the Huxley sounds dialed in, it was time to tackle the giant flying whale. Let's bring Leviathan out here, shall we? Or at least Leviathan Jr. They won't let me carry around multi-million-dollar worth of equipment. So I have to bring out the Sometimes he takes a flight all over the room, but I guess he's a little tired today, so he's making a short flight. I brought him at another conference, and he kind of flew off somewhere, and we couldn't track him, so like he took a joyride and disappeared.
That begs a question for the presentation, the Intel presentation. Was the whale key to go towards motion, like with people holding their arms up and trying to attract it?
We had a specific flight path that we built for the whale.
It would be cool if it was interactive with the audience.
Yeah, that was more the Huxleys. The Huxleys were super interactive, yeah. So our first and most kind of critical objective was actually to make sure the audience could connect with the whale and its immense power. And we needed the sound to really create a sense of scale, size, and give Leviathan its presence. And some of what we did was pretty straightforward. We actually used a ton of low frequencies. And in fact, we used so many low frequencies that we caused the building to shake. So during the keynote, which was in the Venetian Ballroom in Las Vegas, when the whale flew over specific sort of proximity zones, the building would shake, and people were like, oh my gosh, the whale's gonna eat me. So it was pretty cool. We also needed sounds of a giant ship, wood creaking, tightening ropes, metal clanks, midshipmen, thunderclaps, wind, so forth. But really, how do we go about creating this giant, genetically fabricated flying whale ship? Well, I kind of thought, what about taking the sounds of flying dragons, slowing them way down, pitch shifting them down as well? Dragons are big flying beasts, although they tend to be fast flyers. Perhaps taking their wing flaps and their body movements, and as I said, slowing them down, pitch shifting them down could be interesting, maybe adding a little bit of reverb to make the sounds even bigger. And the greater creative team, they loved this idea, and they gave me the go-ahead to experiment. And I was super thrilled about that. But then I realized, where are we going to find a dragon? Now, the process I just discussed, particularly with regards to the Huxley sounds, how I approach those characters, as I said, is called audio or sound concepting. And like all creative endeavors, great audio design really comes from planning and iteration. So let's just talk a little bit about the notion of sound concepting and the important concept of iteration and doing what's best for the creative vision. Now, I can tell you, coming from the audio side of things and from experience, that when I work with a client that has a difficult time putting their vision into a clear creative direction, sending audio files to them to listen to and review can be the most effective way to get the job done. Now, for instance, I was asked to create the audio, both sound design and music, for a gesture-based media interface project. So the first questions I asked the executive producer were, okay, so what styles or types of sounds are you looking for? Do you want something very organic, or do you want something more electronic? And almost immediately, the producer shrugged his shoulders, he put his hands up in the air, and he gave me a hearty, I don't know, just do whatever you want. Now, of course, I immediately read this as, well, I'm not very good at articulating what I want when it comes to sound, so I really don't want you to do whatever you want, but I am unable to convey the vision to you. So I knew that at that point, my best strategy really was to quickly mock up some sound concepts or sonic ideas for these possible interface sounds for the producer to review. And voila, he now magically found his words and was incredibly good at telling me what he didn't like about the demos. Now, this is because people generally struggle with talking about sound and what they want, but they're often quite good at expressing about what they dislike when presented with demos. So think about quickly concepting out some ideas, as this can be the best way to communicate, particularly if words alone are not providing enough clarity and getting that point across. And then you can continue to iterate on those concepts as necessary to build out the sounds, the soundscape, or whatever. And then the producer designer can provide directions such as, yeah, that totally hits the mark, that's exactly what I was thinking, or no, that's not quite right, try making it more like this or less like this. And I gotta say, a lot of times, sound concepting is really the only way to experiment and conceive the sound of objects and or creatures that don't exist in real life. Incidentally, the audio team had created such a fast and efficient iterative workflow with concepting and creation on the Leviathan project that we ended up leading programming, art, and animation. So there were times where they actually bent what they were doing to the sounds we developed. So sound concepts can be anything from a number of draft sound and environment sketches to an audio track that's synced to animatics to a sound narrative or a soundscape. So something to think about whether you are a sound person or a producer designer. Now, in parallel to the sound design development, we also needed to create an epic score that would align to the action on screen. And in order to pull this off, we quickly realized that we needed the composer to send us musical frameworks and me as the audio designer to send him early sound elements. And I have to say, it's really essential that these two disciplines coordinate their efforts early on so that you're working together towards a cohesive, holistic unit and really trying to create a rhythm within a scene. You know, where will sound design drive the scene versus the music? If there's sound, music, and dialogue all in the scene, make sure they're not all stepping on each other. In the longer demo at the Consumer Electronics Show, we also had dialogue. So we sent files back and forth to each other and discussed how each would tackle the audio spectrum to make sure that the frequency properties of the sounds and the instrument choices and ranges were not colliding with each other or masking each other. So if there was a lot of low rumbles and sounds in a scene, then the score stayed away from those bass registers and instead emphasized the medium and high frequencies with brass and string parts. We also planned where sound design and music could blur the lines, with sound doing something musical and music creating effects from instruments. So I talked to the composer about us incorporating sounds into the score to create a very compelling narrative. And we did a blend of animal vocalizations that we created from our own vocalizations and modified samples. And then we also chose to create those sounds with orchestral instruments to provide an almost ethereal texture. And frankly, I have to say, it's a pretty nice thing when the two disciplines blur the lines and blend into one. Let me just play you a little piece of one of the ambient sound stems or ambient musical stems. A lot of frequency content in there too. So the more effectively we work with our audio counterparts, the greater a project's potential becomes. And in this case, we were given a reference track from a Hans Zimmer composition from the Man of Steel film that Alex had worked on. And this really provided a basic harmonic mapping which the composer could orchestrate from, building in epic moments that really swelled with glorious movement to really emphasize the size and the weight of the whale and to give the score amazing lift and emotion. Now, this is what Leviathan looks like now. This is the updated Sundance 2016 version of Leviathan. So, how then do you return to a project 2 years later and ensure continued artistic integrity in the face of some amazing technological enhancements, as well as story and character enhancements? Well, let me first play for you the Leviathan Project Sundance 2016 sizzle video, just to kind of give you a little insight into the project.
Leviathan is essentially a project about the future of storytelling. Technologies are radically changing the way we think about story.
How do you get multiple audiences in? How do you share it? What does this kind of story world mean communally?
There are creatives within Intel who are interested in those questions.
Leviathan, it's a great example of how blending the real world and the digital world can truly transform entertainment.
What augmented reality does, it does what storytellers have always done. It makes you see the world differently.
Having a story world that we've had the opportunity to build, it's full of overlapping and complicated stories. I think it's been a tremendous experience, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing it with a bigger group of people.
At the New Frontier exhibition at Sundance, we're going to be bringing what I would call as a mixed reality experience.
Leviathan, which is a giant flying whale, 1,000-foot long, that's on a voyage from London to Moscow.
And you'll be flying up to the Leviathan whale to go into the science laboratory. This whole laboratory is devoted to genetic fabrication to create hybrid mutant creatures. And having that physical haptic feedback where you feel like you're part of that world and you're really immersively participating in this experiment. It's a great opportunity for Sundance attendees to come and see something that you can't really see anywhere else. It doesn't exist anywhere else.
Trying to understand that next medium is something that storytellers are going to have to get out in front of.
We're always looking for new stories, but I don't think we ever replace our old stories. Instead, we find new things to add on and new ways to go back into those worlds that we love.
I think it's our job as storytellers to create narratives that are going to be responsive to the possibilities of the engineering, but push the capabilities far beyond what anyone's thinking right now.
So here's actually somebody working with the Leviathan project at Sundance 2016. So as I mentioned, we updated the narrative and we created an AR/VR mashup experience, which features a new set of characters and being able to create fabricant creatures while working with physical objects in VR space. So here the person is working with sensor-mapped props right there that would show up in the virtual space. So the VR story takes place inside Leviathan, where scientists create, test, and study fabricated beasts. Designed to be emotionally engaging and to really exploit VR's full capability, the story lets users create their own fabricated creatures. So now with the help of these, as you can kind of see them, with the help of these gloves that are equipped with motion sensors, and then also a hacked Oculus Rift, visitors could interact with some of the objects in the ship's laboratory, the incubator as we called it, which has these green, these green painted props in the real world that are then motion tracked as well. And as I said, you could also create some genetically fabricated creatures of your own. And here's actually a little video of Casey Affleck, Ben Affleck's brother, after he created a comb jelly fabricant, then controlling it. And then we had also the augmented reality segment, which mainly focused on letting visitors use their tablet screens to watch Leviathan kind of undulate through the room's big display and float over the heads of people in the room. And then also still using their tablets, you could use that associated technology to play with the Huxleys that the Leviathan spewed out. Now, for this particular experience, we utilized audio middleware, Wise and 3Dception. I wanted to really create an efficient and streamlined workflow in which the audio team could be managing everything and take a lot of the pressure off of the development team's backs. Plus, with the fact that the team wanted there to be dynamic sound and variable sound, state-based controls, transitions, switches, and now that we had this VR experience, sounds had to be spatialized. The amplitude and frequency information needed to be properly attenuated, and we wanted to dynamically mix all the audio in real time as well. So by using these two pieces of audio middleware, everything was manipulated and mixed based on what was happening in the narrative and what the user was doing. So we were able to really realize our dynamic and immersive 360-degree experience. And here's just another video of actually a user. You could take on the role of a Huxley inside the whale ship and as she's kind of flying around.
Right up to the side, she put hers out. Wow. Well, once she took off, she's fine. She doesn't oh my gosh, that was phenomenal. Yeah, that was like the best thing I had seen. We didn't get off. We couldn't get off. Oh.
And then here's a view of taking on that role of a Huxley. We kind of gave you like Huxley vision and Huxley hearing, so sort of a subjective viewpoint.
Fascinating. The baby has mind melded with you, a rare form of imprinting. You are seeing through its nerve endings right now.
So seeing and hearing through a Huxley.
When a Huxley mind melds with you, you can usually fly. Would you try? Wherever you point your tentacle is where...
Now let's talk quickly about the Huxley fabricants, or how do you take a baby Huxley and combine it with existing animals, such as a red fan parrot, a bioluminescent comb jelly, a chameleon, and a rhinoceros beetle, while preserving its base characteristics of a baby Huxley? Well, we started off with using the original baby Huxley sounds and gestures from the CES AR experience as the base sounds to merge with the various animal mixtures in starting our fabricant sound concepting phase. One of the first big questions, though, that we had for the greater creative team is what they wanted to hear more. Did they want to hear more of a merged animal in the fabricant, so a bias towards something like the parrot, for instance, with a bit of Huxley? Or did they want some kind of 50-50 seamless blend between a Huxley giggle and a parrot squawk? The thing is, if we did something like that, you would still need to bring out more of the other animals so that you could get a feel for the cross blend. We also felt that you had to be careful with doing too much of a blend because that could yield sounds that would neither be Huxley nor parrot or comb jelly or rhinoceros beetle or so forth. Ultimately, the greater creative team wanted it to be more of a Huxley sound with a 60-40 split between the animals. So always still realizing it still is a baby Huxley. So once we got the fabricants' general vocalization sound palette worked out, we then focused on their movement and surface texture sounds. So for instance, the comb jelly possessing a slight balloon wobble, the beetle having clattering wing cases, the chameleon having leathery skin, and the parrot having rustling feathers. Let's just bring out one of those fabricants right now. Let's bring out the Huxley parrot. Bill, I might need your help again to hold this.
A little farther, I guess.
Thank you. You're a great assistant. So here's now the Huxley parrot. So you can kind of, well, I go through the same motion, but the different kind of sound quality. I got to take a picture of this guy. Everybody always likes taking a selfie with a Huxley. Come on. There we go. Okay. Then, besides the Huxley fabricants, we also introduced Gertie and Charlie, which are the main Huxley protagonists in the VR experience. And Gertie's the tiny runt baby Huxley that causes mayhem throughout the lab. And Charlie is the teenage Huxley that's Amherst's assistant and the one that uses his bioelectricity to charge the incubator to create baby Huxleys. And Amherst is the human scientist protagonist that guides you through the VR experience. Now, the success for Charlie and Gertie really depended on a full range of sounds. Sounds that express various emotional tones, moods, and personality characteristics. And the focus with these two characters was on creating unique and compelling characters, not just standard Huxleys. So we really needed to capture the essence of their personalities and the relationship between Charlie and Gertie. We needed to treat this role and relationship as a full-on rich and deep story unto itself. So storytelling and characterization through sound, and not relegating sound to just a bunch of assets. Obviously, there also needed to be a definite difference between how the two articulated their vocalizations and emotions. So a giggle from Gertie should sound different than a giggle from Charlie. And also we had to think about what emotive qualities do they each have? How do they sound when they interact with each other? So first we tackled Gertie. And I perceived Gertie to be this really mischievous baby Huxley that craves attention. So I modeled her after my puppy. Oh, it'd be good to plug this in. There's concept sketches for Charlie and Gertie. And there's my puppy, Cody. Now, in fact, we actually utilized Cody's vocalizations as the base sounds for Gertie, particularly her whines and whimpers that she would make when she wanted her own way but wasn't necessarily getting it. And we used these as the base for which to work with. So let's listen to Cody for a little bit, shall we? Again, just like with the baby Huxleys, for Charlie and Gertie, we had to create those draft basic general Vox concept sketches for the greater creative team to review and give us feedback on. And once we honed in on those sounds, we could then develop the specific actions for the two Huxleys, like giggling and chirping and squeaking and so forth. But in the beginning, we really just had to establish their voices. You know, what were their sound colors? What were their sound frequencies? And then once we had that, we created their specific tones and intentions. You know, Gertie being excited or anxious, and Charlie being annoyed or irritated. And this process really allowed us to narrow down the sounds and voices of Charlie and Gertie so that we could develop out their characterizations and sound range. And here's a close to final just excerpt of Charlie and Gertie interacting together with Amherst at the incubator.
Today, you will be adapting a bass Huxley, like Charles here. Huxleys also play a crucial role in the fabricant making process, as Charlie will soon demonstrate. Let's begin the fabricant making process. Charlie, go and put Gertie someplace safe and prepare yourself for the charging. These modified fireflies will be your guide through the fabrication process.
And here's just a series of some character concepting we did with some early animation tests.
This is Charlie, a teen Huxley, and let's call her Gertie. Just being hatched. Rather a runt, I'm afraid. Never had one that small. For years, our lab has worked in isolation, so we are thrilled to finally have you, an esteemed expert, witness our fabricant process firsthand. Pull the valve handle towards you to release the gas. Charles! Hurry, you're almost late. You have work to do. Now, pull the lever and then stand back. Now, Charlie!
And it was really cool hearing this from Clive Downey, Unity's chief marketing officer. Leviathan is one of the most innovative storytelling platforms to date. Using Unity, the Leviathan creators developed an immersive, layered experience with incredible depth. We're proud to be part of this groundbreaking project. And on that note, I think we've run out of time. So thank you so much, everyone. If you have any questions, come on up. I'd be happy to answer them.